Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, after the siege and the assault of Troy, when that burg was destroyed and burnt to ashes, and the traitor tried for his treason, the noble Aeneas and his kin sailed forth to become princes and patrons of well nigh all the Western Isles. Thus Romulus built Rome and gave to the city his own name, which it bears even to this day, and Titius turned him to Tuscany, and Langobard raised him up dwellings in Lombardy, and Felix Brutus sailed far over the French flood, and founded the kingdom of Britain, wherein have been war and waste and wonder, and bliss and bale ofttimes since. And in that kingdom of Britain have been wrought more gallant deeds than in any other, but of all British kings Arthur was the most valiant, as I have heard tell. Therefore will I set forth a wondrous adventure that fell out in his time. And if you will listen to me but for a little while, I will tell it even as it stands in story, stiff and strong, fixed in the letter, as it hath long been known in the land. King Arthur lay at Camelot upon a Christmas tide, with many a gallant lord and lovely lady, and all the noble brotherhood of the Round Table. There they held rich revels with gay talk and jest, one while they would ride forth to joust and tourney, and again back to the court to make carols, for there was the feast holden 15 days with all the mirth that men could devise, song and glee, glorious to hear, in the daytime, and dancing at night. Halls and chambers were crowded with noble guests, the bravest of knights and the loveliest of ladies, and Arthur himself was the comeliest king that ever held a court, for all this fair folk were in their youth the fairest and most fortunate under heaven, and the king himself of such fame that it were hard now to name so valiant a hero. Now the new year had but newly come in, and on that day a double portion was served on the high table to all the noble guests, and thither came the king with all his knights, when the service in the chapel had been sung to an end, and they greeted each other for the new year, and gave rich gifts, the one to the other, and they that received them were not wroth, that may ye well believe. And the maidens laughed and made mirth till it was time to get them to meat. Then they washed and sat them down to the feast in fitting rank and order, and Guinevere the queen, gaily clad, sat on the high dais. Silken was her seat, with a fair canopy over her head, of rich tapestries of tars, embroidered and studded with costly gems. Fair she was to look upon, with her shining grey eyes. A fairer woman might no man boast himself of having seen. But Arthur would not eat till all were served, so full of joy and gladness was he. Even as a child, he liked not either to lie long, or to sit long at meat, so worked upon him his young blood and his wild brain. And another custom he had also, that came of his nobility, that he would never eat upon an high day till he had been advised of some knightly deed, or some strange and marvellous tale of his ancestors, or of arms, or of other ventures, or till some stranger knight should seek of him leave to joust with one of the Round Table, that they might set their lives in jeopardy one against another, as fortune might favour them. Such was the king's custom when he sat in hall at each high feast, with his noble knights. Therefore on that new year tide he abode, fair of face, on the throne, and made much mirth withal. Thus the king sat before the high tables, and spake of many things, and their good Sir Gawain was seated by Guinevere the queen, and on her other side sat Agravain, Legerdemain. Both were the king's sister's sons, and full gallant knights. And at the end of the table was Bishop Borduin, and Ewain, King Urien's son, sat at the other side alone. These were worthily served on the dais, and at the lower tables sat many valiant knights. Then they bare the first course with the blast of trumpets and waving of banners, with the sound of drums and pipes, of song and lute, that many a heart was uplifted at the melody. Many were the dainties, and rare the meats, so great was the plenty they might scarce find room on the board to set on the dishes. Each helped himself as he liked best, and to each 2 were 12 dishes, with great plenty of beer and wine. Now I will say no more of the service, but that ye may know there was no lack, for there drew near a venture that the folk might well have left their labour to gaze upon. As the sound of the music ceased, and the first course had been fitly served, there came in at the hall door one terrible to behold, of stature greater than any on earth, from neck to loins so strong and thickly made, and with limbs so long and so great that he seemed even as a giant, and yet he was but a man, only the mightiest that might mount a steed, broad of chest and shoulders and slender of waist, and all his features of like fashion, but men marvelled much at his colour, for he rode even as a knight, yet was green all over. For he was clad all in green, with a straight coat, and a mantle above, all decked and lined with fur was the cloth, and the hood that was thrown back from his locks and lay on his shoulders. Hose had he of the same green, and spurs of bright gold with silken fastenings richly worked, and all his vesture was verily green. Around his waist and his saddle were bands with fair stones set upon silken work, 'twere too long to tell of all the trifles that were embroidered thereon, birds and insects in gay gauds of green and gold. All the trappings of his steed were of metal of like enamel, even the stirrups that he stood in stain of the same, and stirrups and saddle-bow alike gleamed and shone with green stones. Even the steed on which he rode was of the same hue, a green horse, great and strong, and hard to hold, with broidered bridle, meet for the rider. The knight was thus gaily dressed in green, his hair falling around his shoulders. On his breast hung a beard, as thick and green as a bush, and the beard and the hair of his head were clipped all round above his elbows. The lower part of his sleeves were fastened with clasps in the same wise as a king's mantle. The horse's mane was crisp and plaited with many a knot folded in with gold thread about the fair green, here a twist of the hair, here another of gold. The tail was twined in like manner, and both were bound about with a band of bright green set with many a precious stone. Then they were tied aloft in a cunning knot, whereon rang many bells of burnished gold. Such a steed might no other ride, nor had such ever been looked upon in that whole ere that time, and all who saw that knight spake and said that a man might scarce abide his stroke. The knight bore no helm nor hauberk, neither gorget nor breastplate, neither shaft nor buckler to smite nor to shield, but in one hand he had a hollow bough, that is greenest when the groves are bare, and in his other an axe, huge and uncomely, a cruel weapon in fashion, if one would picture it. The head was an ell-yard long, the metal all of green steel and gold, the blade burnished bright, with a broad edge, as well shapen to shear as a sharp razor. The steel was set into a strong stuff, all bound round with iron, even to the end, and engraved with green in cunning work. A lace was twined about it, that looped at the head, and all adown the handle it was clasped with tassels on buttons of bright green richly broidered. The knight rideth through the entrance of the hall, driving straight to the high dais, and greeted no man, but looked ever upwards, and the first words he spake were, "Where is the ruler of this folk? I would gladly look upon that hero, and have speech with him." He cast his eyes on the knights, and mustered them up and down, striving ever to see who of them was of most renown. Then was there great gazing to behold that chief, for each man marvelled what it might mean that a knight and his steed should have even such a hue as the green grass, and that seemed even greener than green enamel on bright gold. All looked on him as he stood, and drew near unto him, wondering greatly what he might be, for many marvels had they seen, but none such as this, and phantasm and fairy did the folk deem it. Therefore were the gallant knights slow to answer, and gazed astounded, and sat stone still, in a deep silence through that goodly hall, as if a slumber were fallen upon them. I deem it was not all for doubt, but some for courtesy, that they might give ear unto his errand. Then Arthur beheld this adventurer before his high days, and knightly he greeted him, for fearful was he never. "Sir," he said, "thou art welcome to this place, lord of this hall am I, and men call me Arthur. Light thee down, and tarry a while, and what thy will is, that shall we learn after." "Nay," quoth the stranger, "so help me he that sitteth on high, 'twas not mine errand to tarry any while in this dwelling, but the praise of this thy folk and thy city is lifted up on high, and thy warriors are holden for the best and the most valiant of those who ride mail-clad to the fight. The wisest and the worthiest of this world are they, and well proven in all knightly sports. And here, as I have heard tell, is fairest courtesy. Therefore have I come hither as at this time." He may be sure by the branch that I bear here that I come in peace, seeking no strife. For had I willed to journey in warlike guise, I have at home both hauberk and helm, shield and shining spear, and other weapons to mine hand. But since I seek no war, my raiment is that of peace. But if thou be as bold as all men tell, thou wilt freely grant me the boon I ask. And Arthur answered, Sir Knight, if thou cravest battle here, thou shalt not fail for lack of a foe. And the knight answered, Nay, I ask no fight. In faith, here on the benches are but beardless children. Were I clad in armour on my steed, there is no man here might match me. Therefore I ask in this court but a Christmas jest, for that it is Yuletide and New Year, and there are here many fain for sport. If any one in this hall holds himself so hardy, so bold both of blood and brain, as to dare strike me one stroke for another, I will give him as a gift this axe, which is heavy enough, in sooth, to handle as he may list, and I will abide the first blow, unarmed as I sit. If any knight be so bold as to prove my words, let him come swiftly to me here, and take this weapon. I quit claim to it. He may keep it as his own, and I will abide his stroke firm on the floor. Then shalt thou give me the right to deal him another. The respite of a year and a day shall he have. Now haste, and let's see whether any here dare say aught.